Welcome to True Crime Case Files. In today's episode, we explore the tragic and horrifying murder of a Navy officer whose secret identity led to her violent death at the hands of her newlywed husband. This is a case where betrayal, anger, and deep insecurities came together in a confrontation with deadly consequences. Valerie Jacobson, 29, was a Navy officer stationed in Jacksonville, Florida, in April of 2019. Valerie grew up in a small town in Ohio and joined the Navy right out of high school. She had always been dedicated to her career, finding both discipline and a sense of purpose through her work. She served on several ships during her time in the military, eventually becoming known for her strong work ethic and attention to detail. Fellow officers said she was the type of person who always made sure her uniform was perfect, her tasks completed, and her superiors satisfied. She lived by a motto that hard work and loyalty were everything. They also said she often seemed more focused on her work than on her personal life, though that changed when she met Tucker Jacobson. Valerie and Tucker met through mutual friends in Jacksonville. After less than 6 months dating, they were married in a small ceremony at a local chapel. Valerie's friends noted she seemed happy but a little anxious in the days leading up to the wedding, especially with her chilly relationship with her future mother-in-law, Miriam. She was also always careful about what she shared with Tucker, never revealing too much about her past and never introducing him to her family in Ohio. Tucker seemed easygoing on the surface, but his behavior became more controlling after the wedding. Valerie's friends noticed a change in her. She became quieter, more withdrawn, and less eager to talk about her new marriage. Despite her struggles in her personal life, Valerie was still committed to her Navy career. She dreamed of one day becoming a high-ranking officer, a goal she was working toward with precision. As April 2019 rolled around, Valerie's future seemed bright on the surface. She was newly married, advancing in her career, and living in a quiet neighborhood in Jacksonville. But beneath the surface, she was hiding a secret that she believed could destroy everything she had built. This secret, which she believed was necessary to protect her career and her marriage, would soon lead to her tragic death. On the morning of April 18, 2019, at around 7:30 a.m., Jacksonville police received a frantic call from Tucker Jacobson. His voice was shaky as he told the dispatcher that he had found his wife, Valerie Jacobson, dead in their home. Tucker said he had been out late the night before with some friends and returned early in the morning, only to discover the horrifying scene. Valerie's body was found in the master bedroom of their modest two-bedroom house on Lexington Drive, in a quiet neighborhood not far from Naval Air Station Jacksonville. The area was usually calm, known for its tree-lined streets and families who had lived there for decades. It wasn't the type of place where you'd expect something like this to happen. When Tucker walked into the bedroom, he claimed to have immediately noticed something was wrong. Valerie was lying on the floor near the bed, unresponsive. He said her body was cold to the touch, and she appeared to be covered in blood. Tucker told police he tried to wake her up, but quickly realized she was gone. In a panic, he called 911. Neighbors later reported that they heard nothing unusual the night before. One neighbor mentioned that she saw Tucker's car pull into the driveway around 7:00 a.m., but there were no loud noises or disturbances beforehand. She described the couple as quiet, kept to themselves, and said they had never heard them argue or fight. The first officer on the scene arrived just minutes after the call. He found Tucker outside the house, pacing nervously. Tucker was visibly shaken and repeatedly asked what the bleep happened to him. The officer immediately noticed signs of a struggle inside the house. The living room appeared untouched, but the bedroom was in disarray. Bloodstains were found on the floor and walls, and there were signs that Valerie had tried to fight back. Valerie's body was found with multiple stab wounds, including in her eyes, later determined to be inflicted by a pair of office scissors, and she had also been strangled with a leather belt. The brutality of the crime shocked even seasoned investigators. The officer called for backup, and detectives arrived shortly after to begin their investigation. Tucker, still in a state of shock, sat on the front steps of the house, head in his hands. As the investigation began, one thing was clear. This was no accident. The violent nature of the crime suggested that whoever did this had a deep personal connection to Valerie. Jacksonville detectives arrived at the Jacobson home on Lexington Drive around 8:00 a.m. on April 18, 2019. Leading the investigation was Detective Marcus Rodas, a 15-year veteran of the Jacksonville Sheriff's Office. Known for his attention to detail, Rodas wasted no time. His partner, Detective Lisa Henson, joined him. She was newer to homicide but had quickly built a reputation for her sharp instincts. Together, they began assessing the scene. The first thing the detectives noticed was the chaotic state of the bedroom. The furniture was knocked over, the bedsheets had been torn, and there were visible blood spatters on the walls and floor. Valerie Jacobson's body lay on the carpet near the bed, her hands still clenched, a sign that she had fought hard against her attacker. The sight was brutal. Valerie had been stabbed multiple times with a pair of office scissors, including in the eyes, and a leather belt was found around her neck, confirming she had also been strangled. Forensics teams were called in shortly after. Crime scene technicians used luminol to detect traces of blood that had been cleaned or missed. They also dusted for fingerprints on the scissors and belt, both of which were left near Valerie's body. The medical examiner arrived to assess the time of death, estimating that Valerie, who was not found to be sexually assaulted, had been killed sometime between 10 p.m. and midnight the night before. Detective Rodas spoke with Officer Mark Daniels, the first responder. Daniels confirmed that Tucker Jacobson had discovered the body early that morning and immediately called 911. Daniels noted that Tucker appeared genuinely distraught, pacing outside and asking over and over what had happened to his wife. However, detectives, unless they're complete idiots, always treat the spouse as a potential suspect, so they kept Tucker at the scene for questioning. The investigation began with a thorough examination of the house. The front door showed no signs of forced entry, and nothing seemed to be missing. Detectives found Valerie's wallet and phone on the kitchen counter, ruling out robbery as a motive. The house itself didn't seem ransacked, except for the bedroom where the violent struggle took place. Detectives Rodas and Henson carefully documented everything, using cameras and laser measurement tools to recreate the scene. As they surveyed the house, they knew they were dealing with a personal crime. This was not a random break-in gone wrong. The sheer violence of the attack pointed to someone who had a deep emotional connection to the victim. The next step would be questioning those closest to Valerie, starting with her husband, Tucker. Tucker Jacobson, 31, was the first person police questioned. As Valerie's husband, he was automatically a key suspect. Tucker worked at a Toyota dealership in Jacksonville, where he sold cars and was known for his easygoing personality. His friends described him as likable, but they also knew he had a temper when he felt disrespected. Lately, Tucker's coworkers noticed he had become more stressed and distracted. They didn't know why, but some suspected it had something to do with his marriage. Tucker and Valerie had a whirlwind romance. They met in the fall of 2018 at a mutual friends party and quickly married 6 months later in a small ceremony. Friends said the couple seemed happy, though there were hints of tension after the wedding, especially with Valerie's contentious relationship with her new mother-in-law, Miriam. Tucker had also become more controlling. He had begun checking Valerie's phone and constantly asking her about her past, including why she hadn't introduced him to her family. It wasn't clear what had caused his sudden distrust, but people close to him noticed a marked change in his behavior. When detectives brought Tucker in for questioning, he was visibly shaken. He told them he had been out drinking with friends and watching a basketball game the night before, arriving home late and falling asleep on the couch. He said he didn't realize Valerie was dead until he found her body early that morning. Tucker insisted he had no idea who could have done this and denied having any problems in his marriage. However, detectives Rodas and Henson noticed inconsistencies in his story. For one, Tucker couldn't provide a solid alibi. His friends confirmed they had been out at a local bar, the Garage, until about 9:30 p.m., but no one had seen him after that. Surveillance footage from a nearby gas station showed Tucker alone, buying cigarettes around 10:15 p.m., but nothing after that. This left a large gap of time unaccounted for. During the interrogation, Tucker's mood shifted. At first, he was distraught and emotional, but as the questioning continued, he became more defensive. When detectives asked about his relationship with Valerie, Tucker admitted they had been arguing more lately, but he said it was about typical marital issues, nothing serious. Despite his claims, detectives couldn't ignore the tension they sensed from him. They asked if Valerie had any secrets she was keeping, and Tucker paused before quickly dismissing the idea. Still, his hesitation caught their attention. Although they had no solid proof that Tucker was involved, his behavior and lack of an alibi made him their prime suspect, at least for the moment. Miriam Jacobson, 57, was next on the list for questioning. She was Tucker's mother and had a troubled relationship with Valerie, her new daughter-in-law. Miriam had never fully accepted Valerie into the family. Behind her polite demeanor, Miriam harbored deep resentment and jealousy towards her new daughter-in-law. Shortly before and after the wedding, she made several inappropriate sexual advances toward Valerie, which Valerie had firmly rejected. This caused a growing rift between them. Embarrassed and angry, Miriam began spreading malicious rumors about Valerie, telling friends and neighbors that she didn't trust her daughter-in-law. She even hinted that Valerie wasn't who she claimed to be, and was sexually cold and infertile, sowing seeds of doubt in anyone who would listen. Miriam's gossip soon reached Tucker, planting suspicions in his mind about Valerie's past. Friends recalled how Miriam would make passive-aggressive remarks about Valerie's private nature, speculating that she could be hiding something important. In one conversation with a neighbor at a local Publix grocery store, Miriam reportedly said, "There's something off about that girl. She's kind of mannish." She also implied that Valerie's military career was an excuse to keep her distance from the family, another layer of mistrust that clouded her interactions with Tucker. When detectives Lois and Henson brought Miriam in for questioning, she appeared calm, even defiant. Miriam didn't try to hide her dislike for Valerie and made it clear she believed Valerie had been lying to her son about something. "I knew there was something wrong with her from the beginning," Miriam said. "She wouldn't let me get close to her, always kept me at arm's length." The detectives pressed her about the night of the murder, asking if she had been in contact with Tucker or Valerie that evening. Miriam claimed she hadn't spoken to either of them, but her tone was sharp, and her responses felt rehearsed. She maintained her innocence, but seemed almost relieved that Valerie was gone, telling the detectives, "Maybe now Tucker can find a bleeping bleep who doesn't have bleeping secrets." Miriam's cold attitude and her role in spreading malicious gossip about Valerie raised red flags for the investigators. They knew her animosity toward Valerie went beyond typical family squabbles. Her inappropriate sexual advances, which had caused Valerie to distance herself, also provided a potential motive for Miriam's dislike. Although Miriam denied having anything to do with the murder, her behavior was suspicious enough to keep her in the spotlight of the investigation. The detectives couldn't rule her out just yet. On the morning of April 18, 2019, investigators found a critical piece of evidence that shifted their focus. Detective Lois received a tip from a confidential informant that Miriam Jacobson had been involved with a known local drug dealer, Dean Darling Vasari. Vasari, 44, was a small-time felon with a long history of drug-related crimes and petty theft in Jacksonville. He had a reputation for taking advantage of vulnerable clients, and Miriam, deeply in debt, was one of them. The informant revealed that Miriam's financial troubles had reached a point where she was trading sexual favors to Vasari in exchange for drugs. Miriam had struggled with an addiction to prescription painkillers for years, a secret she hid from her son Tucker. She had racked up significant debts with Vasari, and by early 2019 she had no way to pay him back. Vasari, known for his violent temper when it came to unpaid debts, had pressured Miriam into taking drastic measures, including selling herself to him for sexual acts. This new information immediately caught the attention of the detectives. They pulled Miriam's financial records and found evidence of large cash withdrawals from her bank account, which lined up with payments to Vasari. These transactions took place in the months leading up to Valerie Jacobson's murder. The investigators also discovered a series of text messages between Miriam and Vasari, where Vasari had grown increasingly threatening, demanding money or other arrangements. One particular text message sent by Vasari on April 14, just days before the murder, read, "Time's running out, Miriam, you dried up old bleep. Better come through, or you'll bleeping regret it." This ominous warning led detectives to wonder if Miriam's desperation over her drug debts had somehow played a role in the crime. Could she have gotten involved in the murder to pay off Vasari, or had Vasari taken matters into his own hands when Miriam couldn't deliver? The discovery of Miriam's drug addiction, her debts to Vasari, and the lengths she went to in order to cover them up, added a new layer of complexity to the case. The detectives now had to consider whether Miriam's connection to Vasari had led to Valerie's murder, directly or indirectly. 2019, just as investigators were closing in on new leads, a surprise crackdown on local drug dealers turned the case on its head. Jacksonville police, in collaboration with federal agents, raided several properties, including the home of Dean Darling Vasari, Miriam Jacobson's drug dealer and sometime sexual partner. The raid was part of a larger operation targeting a rising opioid epidemic in the region. During the raid, law enforcement found substantial evidence tying Vasari to a network of illegal drug sales. Hidden in his rundown apartment were bags of pills, several unregistered firearms, and stacks of cash. What caught the attention of the investigators working Valerie Jacobson's murder, however, was something more personal. an envelope filled with pictures of Miriam and her family members, including Valerie and Tucker, accompanied by a series of sexually explicit text messages between the two. These messages showed that Miriam had not only been buying drugs from Vasari, but had also been involved in a deeply troubling personal relationship with him. In the texts, Vasari repeatedly pressured Miriam to do more to repay her debts. He hinted at favors beyond money. And in one particularly incriminating message, sent just days before Valerie's death, he said, "You're out of options, Miriam. Handle it, or I'll make it worse for you." These discoveries confirmed what detectives had suspected, that Miriam was caught in a dangerous situation. Desperate to pay off her debts and keep her secrets hidden, Miriam may have been forced to take extreme measures. Investigators now wondered if she had been blackmailed or coerced into something far worse, including murder. With new evidence in hand, detectives re-interviewed key witnesses, including Miriam's son, Tucker. His earlier insistence that his mother had nothing to do with Valerie's murder seemed increasingly unlikely. Tucker, who had been struggling with the emotional toll of losing his wife, was visibly shaken when confronted with the truth about his mother's drug debts and her toxic relationship with Vasari. As the case continued to unfold, one thing was clear: Miriam Jacobson's involvement in the criminal underworld, her connection to Vasari, and her desperation to keep her secrets hidden had put everyone around her in danger. By late April of 2019, the investigation into Valerie Jacobson's murder was revealing shocking details about her life. While many initially thought she had a perfect marriage to her husband, Tucker Jacobson, the truth was much darker. Valerie had been living in fear, worried that her past would destroy both her career in the Navy and her new marriage. Valerie was a dedicated service member who had enlisted in the Navy years earlier. She loved her job and the sense of duty it provided. However, she faced a constant fear of losing everything she had worked for if her transgender identity was revealed. The military had strict policies about gender identity, and Valerie knew that being open about her past could lead to immediate repercussions, including losing her position. To keep her secret safe, Valerie had carefully hidden documents related to her transition. Unfortunately, in early April 2019, her husband Tucker stumbled upon paperwork that revealed Valerie's true identity. The discovery shattered the trust in their relationship and triggered a wave of emotions. Friends reported that Valerie was terrified of how Tucker would react. She feared that he might reject her, just as she worried about how her Navy career could be jeopardized if anyone found out. The tension between the couple grew in the weeks leading up to Valerie's death. Tucker had shown signs of anger and betrayal, feeling that Valerie had deceived him by not revealing her past before their marriage. Just a few months after their February wedding, their relationship deteriorated rapidly. Friends noticed a change in Valerie's demeanor. She was anxious and withdrawn, worried that her secret would destroy her life. On the night of April 28, 2019, a heated argument erupted between the couple in their apartment in Jacksonville, Florida. Neighbors reported hearing shouting and crashing sounds. Hours later, Valerie was found dead in their home, a victim of a violent struggle. Detectives quickly focused on Tucker, as he was the last person to see Valerie alive. Surveillance footage placed him at the apartment just before the murder, contradicting his claims that he had left. As police dug deeper, they discovered that Tucker had conducted online searches related to violence and betrayal. This evidence painted a troubling picture of premeditated intent. On May 1, 2019, Tucker was arrested, maintaining that he loved Valerie and could never harm her. However, as the investigation progressed, the truth of Valerie's fear came to light, highlighting the struggles many face with acceptance and identity. The case drew significant media attention, raising awareness about the challenges transgender individuals encounter, especially in traditional professions like the military. In late October 2019, the trial of Tucker Jacobson began, gripping Jacksonville as it unfolded. Tucker, now 31, stood accused of killing his wife, Navy officer Valerie Jacobson, after discovering she was transgender. The courtroom was tense as prosecutor Karen Lowry, a 45-year-old no-nonsense attorney with a reputation for toughness, laid out the case. Lowry argued that Tucker's actions were fueled by a combination of rage, betrayal, and transphobia. She told the jury that Valerie had hidden her past for fear of losing her husband and her Navy career, which she had built over 8 years. As Valerie's transition came to light, Lowry painted a picture of Tucker as a man who couldn't handle the truth, unable to accept his wife's identity. The discovery of Valerie's medical records had sparked the violent confrontation that led to her death. On the other side of the courtroom, Tucker's defense attorney, Michael Reed, 50, worked to shift the narrative. Reed argued that the murder was not premeditated, but a tragic heat-of-the-moment reaction. He asked the jury to consider Tucker's shock and emotional state of the time, suggesting that while Tucker's actions were inexcusable, they were not driven by hatred or intent to kill. Reed pushed for leniency, saying Tucker had already lost his wife and that his future shouldn't be defined by one horrific night. Throughout the trial, Valerie's family sat quietly in the courtroom, visibly shaken. They had lost not only a daughter, but also the privacy and dignity of her life. As the details of Valerie's transition and her fears about her identity were exposed to the world, the trial gained widespread attention, with outlets following every twist. The story sparked conversations about the challenges faced by transgender service members and the dangers of transphobia in intimate relationships. In November 2019, the jury found Tucker guilty of second-degree murder. He was sentenced to 30 years in prison. For some, it was a just outcome, but for Valerie's loved ones, it didn't fully bring justice for her lost life. The case continued to resonate, highlighting the ongoing fight for acceptance and protection in the LGBTQ+ community. After the trial, Tucker Jacobson began serving his 30-year sentence at a Florida state prison. While in prison, Tucker remained largely silent about the events leading up to Valerie's murder. Reports indicated that he struggled with remorse, but some speculated whether he had ever fully accepted his wife's identity. The case stirred ongoing debate in the public about the intersections of transphobia, domestic violence, and the justice system. Meanwhile, Miriam Jacobson, Tucker's mother, faced her own downfall. Investigators uncovered that Miriam had been deeply involved in the events that led to her daughter-in-law's tragic death. Miriam had been spreading malicious gossip about Valerie long before the murder, fueled by the fact that she had made several inappropriate advances toward Valerie, which were rejected. The strained relationship between the two women grew worse as Miriam harbored resentment and jealousy toward her new daughter-in-law. In addition, Miriam was found to be in deep financial trouble, owing thousands to her drug dealer, Dean Darling Misery. She had resorted to selling herself to pay off her debt, leaving her trapped in a dangerous world of addiction. Her reputation in Jacksonville, where she had once been seen as a pillar of the community, was now in tatters. By mid-2019, Miriam faced charges of drug possession and solicitation. She was sentenced to 2 years in prison for her involvement in drug-related crimes. Dean Darling Misery, Miriam's drug dealer, didn't fare much better. A notorious figure in the Jacksonville drug scene, Basari had built a reputation for preying on vulnerable women, exploiting them in exchange for drugs. His operation was uncovered during the investigation into Miriam's activities, and he was arrested in a drug bust in July 2019. Charged with drug trafficking and human exploitation, Basari faced 20 years in federal prison. His empire crumbled as authorities shut down his network, bringing a temporary end to his influence over the city's underworld.